was reading Sapiens, and one of the case he makes on why humans took over the planet basically is because we coordinate flexibly in large numbers. Trust is the friction to coordination or cooperation. We can solve trust. We just upgrade the evolutionary advantage of human civilization. So Eigenlayer was conceived as a solution to expanding the scope of permissionless innovation from only the smart contract layer where you just write apps to now you write any decentralized protocol and you can deploy it.
Everyone, please welcome back to the Block Research Podcast. I'm your host, Larry Cermak, CEO of The Block, and today we're joined by Sreeram Kannan, the creator of EIGENlayer. So welcome, Sreeram.
Thank you so much, Larry. It is a pleasure. Super excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Appreciate you joining. So first question, just to warm up a little bit. You obviously, you have a very deep background in tech. And what kind of led to your inspiration to, start EIGENlayer, and what was your journey from that tech background into crypto and how that kind of evolved into where you are today?
Yeah, my PhD master's and PhD back from 2006 to 11 was on peer-to-peer wireless systems. So I have a long-standing interest in that technology, but that didn't go anywhere. There is no peer-to-peer. We have infrastructure-based data. We have like base stations or access points, but so I moved out from that to work on genomics for many years, and had the opportunity to work with some of the best people here at the University of Washington, including 2 breakthrough prize winners on genomics. But in 2017 and 2018, my PhD advisor called me with, "Hey, Sreeram, this Bitcoin. It's all about like optimizing throughput and latency, and it's a peer-to-peer network. It's really interesting." It was technologically like a perfect fit. But one of my principles at that time was I need to have a 30-year project. Otherwise, I'm not working on something. Because, earlier in my life, I had worked on things based purely out of curiosity and passion, rather than like a vision and an impact. And so as I had switched into this vision and impact-oriented mindset, I had like a long project for genomics. So I needed, unless I could find a similar resonance, I would not switch. And one of the things that I remember vividly is I was reading Sapiens, and one of the case he makes on why humans are took over the planet basically is because we coordinate flexibly in large numbers. And trust is the friction to coordination or cooperation. If we can solve trust, we just upgrade the evolutionary advantage of human civilization. That to me was such a mind-bending, fascinating idea. And it was also a perfect technological fit. Like we had worked on this kind of stuff, and nobody from that background was even looking into crypto. There were the geeks, like the hackers, there were like cryptographers, but nobody who would build basically large-scale wireless systems or understand, information theory had been in the space. So we were like, okay, let's do it. So everything aligned. So I started working on it, particularly EIGENlayer. So as I was working on it, one of the things I figured over the time is this kind of, as we create a trust layer, one thing that happened very powerfully, and I was observing, is, one of the people in my team right now is Gajesh. Gajesh is 16 years old from India. And he wrote his first set of contracts when he was 12. And he doesn't come from a big family or anything. He just like figured out, how to code himself when he was 12. And $7 million was deposited into his contracts. And I was just sitting and thinking about this and about events like this. It's insane, right? Like what only JP Morgan could do. Like a random kid, no-name kid from nowhere is doing. And that just so that's permissionless innovation. But as I was looking at it, there was a lot of permissionless innovation at the application layer. But I wanted to innovate at the core protocol layer because that's how does peer-to-peer networks work and coordinate and all that. And there is no permission for me to touch anything. I can't change the peer-to-peer layer at Bitcoin. I can't change the peer-to-peer layer at Ethereum. And then I was observing this pent up energy, not only from me, but like lots of other people who are really good at the core infra layer. They needed a lot of permission. In fact, they needed permission not from one company to push their change. Like, you can't, if it was Google, you could just talk to the VP at Google and like, make a deal or something. You have to talk to the infinite community at Bitcoin, the infinite community at Ethereum. And that just like made no sense to me that a distributed systems builder has to go do that. So Eigenlayer was conceived as a solution to expanding the scope of permissionless innovation from only the smart contract layer where you just write apps to now you write any decentralized protocol and you can deploy it. So that is the vision. In fact, we didn't have staking or restaking. We came up with the name EigenLayer before we had, the particular solution. The problem was what drove us to it: open innovation, and Eigen means your own in German. So it's your own layer. Anybody can come in and build whatever they want, arbitrary decentralized protocols. So that's the vision.
And did you ever, based on your protocol background, did you ever want to start a layer one, or did you immediately go to, well, Ethereum kind of has the right trade-off mix, and therefore I want to build on top of it, and then also obviously.
No, not at all. So the flow was first as an academic. I was not interested in anything. I told you I was driven by impact. So I wanted to make sure that systems we build or design are usable. So the first instinct was let's take it to Bitcoin and let's just, it's a free open thing. Like let's get the protocol upgrade for Bitcoin, or let's go to Ethereum and Bitcoin's like, you crazy, get the hell out. Ethereum's like, wow, interesting. We got like 30 ideas here on the table. Maybe one of them will make it in 3 years. If you want to hang around and write EIPs. I thought it was very, still like out of 30 ideas, maybe 30 ideas are all very good, but only one of them will get in. And so it's very complex and hard. And so we said, okay, after trying all these things, the only option is you have to start your own layer one. And we said like a lot of people are writing white papers. It's 2018. And so the main thing to do was write white papers for a layer one. And so I was like, oh, let's not do that. Let's build a blockchain before we write a white paper. So we had actually like put together a whole team of kind of PhDs from UW, Stanford, MIT. And we just built a first version of a blockchain called Trifecta. And only after we built it, we realized building is not the hardest part. Getting the ecosystem around it is the hardest part. And we were so massively unequipped to do anything like that. And it requires such a coincidence of being an evangelist, of a community builder, of a, economy creator, and like, just like makes no sense. And being a great protocol thinker. One person should not be all these things, or even no team can be all these things. And so I just gave up on that and went back to the theory that if we are coordinating flexibly, then I should just be, as a distributed system builder, able to contribute my distributed system without having to build an ecosystem or anything. And all of these systems should interoperate to create like powerful net systems.
And in that journey, and quickly I'll go back to Eigen, but in that journey, when you were kind of deciding what to spend your time and energy on, were you like ideologically driven, impact driven mostly, or did you also think about, well, the value capture is maybe the greatest for layer ones, and then eventually layer twos, and maybe I should focus there because there's maybe the biggest opportunity to raise the most capital, and then the best opportunity for exiting? Or were you just like, well, I don't even want to care about that. I just want to build something that is useful, that will have the largest impact, and then all that will come later?
At the University of Washington, we had this UW Blockchain Research Lab, and my fascination was with building what I call the digital commons. We have common spaces, right? Like we have parks, forests, all of these in well-run countries, which are commons, equal access to all of us and usable. And the digital world, like as more of our life moves digital, we're living online pretty much all the time. But the online spaces, there is no commons where, anybody is an equal. We can all trade equally. And what is happening is there are like authority controlled commons like Twitter. And you agree with the authority or disagree with the authority, but there is an authority who has root access to the commons. And so that's not a commons anymore. So building the digital commons was the kind of vision. And we had that at the University of Washington. And like I said earlier, I would have been very happy that the impact is that Bitcoin or Ethereum used our protocol. That's why even now I say we'll be super happy when Ethereum wants to internalize the Eigenlayer protocol. It can be a default part of Ethereum. Nothing else is needed. Because I think the edge is always in innovation. People who invent, that's where the edge is. Any protocol, like once you ossify it, there's only so much. Like all the edge and value is in what is in the future, not and how we can build the future rather than what. If Eigenlayer is a default protocol in Ethereum, I will go and build 30 protocols on top of it. Like it gives me more energy and interest. So this is one of the things about having a 30-year vision and not working out of, hey, I got an idea, I'm building this. Because if somebody builds this thing better than what I can build the next thing even faster. So that's how we operate.
When you guys launched Eigen on mainnet, you shared your vision, which you called verifiable digital commons, right? And can you unpack this a little bit, this statement, and how Eigen kind of fits into this vision and what it means overall?
Yes. I briefly alluded to what the digital commons is. Like commons, all of us use digital commons. We want digital spaces that all of us can use. You can think of Ethereum as the starting point of this digital commons vision. So if you think of what Bitcoin's vision was, it's sovereign money. Like, hey, I hold my money. I don't need to talk to anybody else. It's great, great vision. And the way Bitcoin accomplishes that is by enforcing property rights on Bitcoin. You have digital property rights enforced. And so that's how you get sovereign money. And if you think of like what Ethereum did is to build something like the financial commons. You can build any kind of financial protocol on top of it. You have this framework for, building all of those things. And so that's the digital commons. In my view, I've even returned that Ethereum is the digital commons. So, and it's not just that what features it allows, what is the underlying drive for why Ethereum was built is something like building the digital commons. And so talk a lot about public goods, funding public infrastructure, all of those kinds of things, right? But okay, so if you think about this thing, building a digital commons, what does it mean? Like, what is the features? And normally what we do in our space is say decentralization is the feature, right? So, it's a decentralized cloud, let's say, right? That could be the digital commons, could be a decentralized cloud. You could build anything on top of it, it's decentralized. But I think this view is a little bit mistaken. So imagine that I'm building like a country and I say, hey, we are going to have decentralized road building. Everybody should build their own roads. I don't want to live in this country, man. Like, I don't want to build a road. Not only nothing will get done, but also I don't want to do it. Just it will be horrible. Some roads will be bumpy. Some roads will be. It's just bad. But what we need is open access to roads. Anybody who wants to use the road, it's a commons. Anybody who wants to use the road should be able to use the road. It should not be like when I'm taking my ambulance and going to the hospital, the road will stop me and say, hey, you have to pay $100,000, otherwise you can't go to the hospital. That's extortion, right? So road is open, equal access for all of us. It's verifiable, which means it does what it's supposed to do. Or it's smooth, it lets everybody go through. So openness and verifiability are the core properties that we want. And input to how we achieve it may be decentralization, maybe something else. It doesn't matter. But the outcome is what we care about. It's open, it's verifiable. So when I build an application, I want to make sure that this application is verifiable, which means it does what it says it does. And it's open, anybody can come and access it. And you can think of like Bitcoin as this first application. It's verifiable that only people who have Bitcoin can spend Bitcoin. It's verifiable that there's only 21 million Bitcoin. And it's open that anybody can transact their Bitcoin when they want to. So openness and verifiability are the two foundational features of these systems. And how do you build a whole economy of open verifiable services? So that was kind of like the starting point. And then once you figure out that these are the two foundational properties, openness and verifiability, then you ask what things are verifiable and how do you make more things verifiable? And the idea was with Eigenlayer, what we did is you can stake your ETH or any other asset, it's just ETH is the dominant asset of the Ethereum ecosystem. Stake your ETH or any other asset on the Ethereum ecosystem, and then make a promise that I will run some bunch of services correctly. And for these services, you run an operator or find an operator and delegate to them. They're downloading the software and running it. So now I can run arbitrary decentralized protocols with credible, verifiable commitments. Verifiable commitments, right? Because I make a commitment that I run it correctly. If I don't run it correctly, there can be a contract in the Eigenlayer ecosystem. We can write a contract and say, hey, if you violate ABCD covenants, you will lose your ETH. And as long as ABCD are verifiable on Ethereum, then you're done. So this is the kind of like the meta structure of the Eigenlayer restaking protocol. Till now, we never used the word restaking. And inside the company, we barely use the word restaking. People mainly think of us as a restaking protocol, but this is like open innovation, coordination. These are the driving values. Staking, restaking is a particular side and input into how we can actually achieve it. The stake your ETH, and then like you can participate in all these protocols, but only if it is verifiable on chain, right? So that's the fundamental constraint. And then as we started building both our own new service, EIGEN DA, and other people were building services, we started understanding that several important things are verifiable off chain, but not on chain. And so this was kind of like a big, problem and a eureka moment for us because some things are not verifiable off on chain, but they're very verifiable off chain. As an example, somebody runs an oracle, a group of nodes stake, and they run an oracle. An oracle brings data from the internet into the blockchain. Let's say the oracle is, who's the current president of the United States? Was the question. And, right now Polymarket's going crazy and people are using it. So you need to know answers to questions like this. How do you get answers to questions like this on chain?
And they're having issues with that as well. Even Polymarket is having issues with that. There's almost every day I see people complaining about outcomes because, to your point, it has to be done by humans or done by a group of coordinated people off chain, which always creates issues.
Exactly. So what are like fundamental primitives that can actually make it much, much more robust? The nominal method is to have like a majority of, some committee or stakers come and verify whether they did it correctly. Stake some token, maybe Eigen, and then say, oh, they did it right or they didn't do it right. But then this one is subject to the tyranny of the majority. The majority may say a lie, right, or collude to like do something really bad. And some other people get affected because of that. So you want systems, in my view, blockchains are really only useful because they don't depend on any majority for making sure that things work right. And so, but how do you do this for like a prediction market or an oracle or, we built EigenDA. EigenDA is a data availability system. You want to let everybody be able to download the data that the nodes are seeing that they've made available. But if all the nodes collude or a majority of the nodes collude and don't give the data, they say, hey, I'm going to hold the data a secret. Because, if you don't have the data, you cannot challenge something or whatever downstream consequences you may have. And I can break the guarantee of the protocol. But on chain, on Ethereum, it is not verifiable that that happened. So this is a huge problem. So, and other people were pointing this out and so on, and we knew this. So we had to create a system where, how do we bring off-chain verifiability on-chain? Okay, sounds very, very hard. And it is hard. It was a major open question, and I think we solved it with the EIGEN token. The idea is how we go from systems that work when the majority is right to how the systems that work, even if the majority is wrong. Let's go back to how Ethereum works. Ethereum keeps making blocks. A majority of validators sign off on the blocks. What if a majority of validators sign off on an invalid block? What happens is, even if a majority signs off on an invalid block, nobody is going to accept that block because people are going to validate or verify that that block is correct. And they're going to fork the Ethereum chain and say, hey, and there is a good cost to fork. Everybody has observed that a major fault has happened, that the validators have gone crazy and signed an invalid block. So I'm going to fork it. So the consensus that this has to be forked is trivial because it's observable to all humans.
It's on-chain.
It's on-chain, exactly. And so that you can just easily fork it. So and it's not the same as like contentious forks because there is no reason to disagree that an invalid block should be accepted. It's part of the protocol that an invalid block should never be accepted. Okay, what is the equivalent thing that we can do for a thing like an oracle? So that's really what we broke new ground with. You stake the eigen and you say, hey, I'm running an oracle, I brought this input. And if this input is wrong, and a majority of the eigen stakers say that the input is wrong, I can't fork Ethereum. This was the problem with staking ETH and running subjective validation tasks. And Vitalik wrote this article saying, do not overload Ethereum consensus. What it really meant is don't offload the risk of forking into Ethereum. You go stake ETH and then do something wrong, and then like something blows up, and people are assuming, oh, Ethereum is going to fork because all the ETH stakers did something wrong on EigenLayer. That's just not a correct separation of protocol and protocol design. So we took this feedback very strongly. In fact, we got this feedback like 1.5 years before Vitalik wrote this article from Don Carrad and many others, that this is the core constraint. This is how Ethereum operates. Because if you don't know the covenants of how a protocol is supposed to operate both on-chain and socially, it's hard to build against it. So we knew this. So we have been working on how to solve this problem because we can't fork Ethereum for validators doing something wrong on EigenLayer. So we built this additional instrument. You stake Eigen, and if all the Eigen stakers do something wrong, you can't fork the Ethereum chain, but you can fork the Eigen token. So instead of forking the chain, you fork the token. Inside the chain, there's the Eigen token, and the token gets forked. Now, there's all kinds of fascinating problems downstream, and we solve all of them. So that's really what the whole, we wrote the title of the paper was the Universal Intersubjective Work Token. You stake it for doing work. Intersubjective is just another word for social consensus or off-chain observable. Things that are off-chain observable. Intersubjective, it's not subjective, it's just personal subjective, like, oh, I love Paris, or I love Prague, which we were talking about just before. It is about how all our subjective opinions, when they converge, we call them like, social consensus or off-chain observable or whatever. For those things, you can fork the Eigen token and impose the crypto economic penalty that you did something wrong, you're going to lose your token, and this other Eigen token is going to take over.
And if there is something that's contentious, if there is a decision that maybe isn't like super black and white, and it's maybe 50-50 or something, how do you decide those scenarios? Like how would that work in practice?
It is a really great question. And so when scenarios so the first idea is try to minimize contention. So when you onboard new forking conditions, it goes through a process because all the Eigen token holders are eventually affected because of contentions. So there's an onboarding. So that's number one. So try to minimize, try to make any condition that we are. So this is another thing that we think about a lot. This is one of the reasons we did not use the word social consensus in the paper or the protocol. Is what people normally think of social consensus is we all come together on Twitter and say, hey, Larry is bad, let's fork him out. Or like, oh, this is like a Gunda Raj. This is not how these systems should work. These systems should work on so the way we think about forking is we fork on self-evident events that are pre-agreed. Self-evident you should know, you should be able to observe that it's evident that this is the right thing. Like, is this block valid? Self-evident. Pre-agreed. We already agreed that this protocol means whenever there's an invalid block, we'll fork. So the thing that happens when what creates contention is what the pre-agreed things are not clear. It's not, I think something's pre-agreed, you think something else is pre-agreed. We're in war, right? Or we didn't think carefully about what we pre-agreed to. As an example, the DAO. The pre-agreement, implicit, not written in any constitution or anything, was code is law. Implicit, agreed. But our DAO hack, code broke, everybody lost their ETH. No, we have to break the pre-agreement. That is the hard part. Nobody disagreed whether it's a hack or not. It's self-evident that it's a hack. The pre-agreed condition was code is law, so don't fork on hacks. So you're breaking the pre-agreed condition. And that puts enormous pressure on the social consensus. So we wanted to make sure, that's why we invented a new word, intersubjective, and didn't want to, what people normally think of as social consensus is that, oh, we post facto agreement, I'll fork you out and this and that. Horrible, horrible world to create. Whoever is the loudest will win, whoever has most money will win, USDC will try to fork it. This is not correct. Fork on pre-agreed events that are self-evident, right? Like that is what you want. But sometimes events you think will be self-evident, but they are at the border. So we do have the case that you raise here, whether it's polymarket, whether it's something else. Even if you try very, very hard, you will have it. So first is minimize forking. People should not induce a cost of forking. So the way it works in EigenLayer is it's really, I love this mechanism. The way we do it is you have to burn a portion of your current eigen, this original fork. You can mint a corresponding portion in the new eigen, but you have to burn the current one. So you have to demonstrate enormous commitment to truth. So you have to do bloodletting to say, hey, man, I'm not just talking here.
I'm not crazy.
I mean what I say. I'm going to burn my eigen 1 and only take a portion of the same portion, maybe also a reward from eigen 2. That means it's serious. Firstly, there's no frivolous contention. It's serious contention. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the second fork, it could happen that there are serious forks. You can see in the US, the Democrat, Republican, information boundaries have been broken. So there's just it's possible you get a Democratic eigen and a Republican eigen. And the way the system is designed, it should rarely happen. But if it does happen, it doesn't break. It doesn't break because, what's happening is, let's say, who's the president and for the next election just goes crazy. People disagree. And there'll be a bunch of people who fork the people who said oh, it's Trump or not Trump. And then it just forks and you have two eigens. So you got the Democratic eigen, you got the Republican eigen. Democratic AVSs use the Democratic eigen. Republican AVSs use the Republican eigen. Neutral AVSs use both the eigens. That's it. So the whole system is it is anti-fragile to even fracture. Because the reason is we are not forking the chain, remember. We're not forking the chain. We are just forking the value. So you can actually, if Republican eigen attracts more value, then let it be more valuable. If Democrat eigen attracts more value, let it be more valuable. And we, as a token or protocol, can remain completely neutral around it.
But that would be very impractical in practice, right? For example, for exchanges to be forking these tokens.
This is a beautiful, beautiful problem, and we solve it. Okay. So the eigen token, this is what I meant by this leads to a whole bunch of downstream problems. Forking is not to be thought about capriciously. And so building a forkable system means you have to put pre-agreed, thought into what happens when a fork happens. So the core breakthrough on eigen is what we call the separation of DeFi, exchanges, everything, financial activities, and staking. Staking is forkable. And DeFi is not forkable. I mean, you better not make it forkable because otherwise, like, oh, what happened to my Uniswap position? What happened to Compound? What happened to my rollup? Like, everything just blows up. And we don't want to build such systems. So the way Eigen works is a two token model. One token, which we call a solid representation, and the other token, which is a forkable representation. If you want to stake, you have to stake the forkable representation. If you want to do DeFi and you want to be neutral to what fork is happening, use a solid representation. A solid representation will be 1:1 honored on every fork.
So obviously you work with the Ethereum Foundation relatively closely, at least with their researchers. Why have you been doing that? Is it to align with them and to make sure that you're going down the right path that will not have negative impact on Ethereum itself? Or like, where do you find the most value with working with, the most knowledgeable researchers in the world when it comes to Ethereum?
We have been working very closely with the Ethereum Foundation researchers from, I would say, February 2022. The first time I went to Denver, and I came back and I have a shocking realization that the Ethereum community is totally principle driven rather than person driven, which is not obvious, right? It's very, very hard to create care about decentralization, credible neutrality, censorship resistance, permissionless innovation, coordination mechanisms, public goods.
Yeah.
Like everything I care about, they already care about. And they build a system, a community, everything around it. And why not just be part of a community that already has exactly the same set of values? Okay, so that was number one. So when I came back from ETH Denver, I didn't go to ETH Denver assuming we are going to build on Ethereum. I went to ETH Denver unsure.
Right.
This is 2022. Came back 100% sure. I felt like I'm part of Ethereum because I value exactly the same things that Ethereum values. And the Ethereum researchers, because I've been a researcher myself and we've had on and off interactions.
Okay.
Gave sharp, useful inputs all the time and very generous with their time from day zero, right? This is a no-name random project, but they are oh, this guy is thinking about important things. I remember I went to Domprod at ETH Denver and I told him, hey, we're building this EIGEN it's going to be ETH staked. And if people stake ETH and they make data unavailable, Ethereum can fork. And so Domprod was sitting across the table and then he just looked up and said, are you crazy? What are you smoking? kind of thing. And he said, EF researchers will not support any forking of Ethereum for any cost outside of the Ethereum protocol. And I'm like, oh, I did not know because I could not find anywhere written what the conditions of social forking and conditions were. I'm like, oh, okay, this is the covenant of Ethereum. This is how it works. And in general, the rate of high value feedback, from the beginning, extremely good. Same thing with Justin, with Vitalik. Everybody's really sharp, useful feedback.
A quick follow up on that. I'm betting almost every single protocol that's doing something on ETH have had the same idea to work with Ethereum researchers, right? Because to your point, they're very sharp. They know the protocol the best. And they can give quick feedback, and they're also good to be associated with. But they almost work with no one, as far as I know, right? They are very selective with who they want to work with. So what do you think actually convinced them to have conversations with you, especially this early on, when you were not necessarily a known person in crypto? The protocol itself basically didn't even exist. Was it your research background? Was it your knowledge that impressed them? Or was it the potential threats that they saw that they wanted to be a part of it?
Probably all of it. But also I think I would add that they could see I resonated with the fundamental values. So, because, when you want to interact across a trust boundary, I don't know who you are. I don't know if I can trust you. If we can agree on common values, then you can negotiate everything on common values. It's much, much easier. And I value these principles more than any other outcome that we may ever get. And that makes it a different kind of a conversation than somebody who is, hey, well, how do I build a free market? How do I build something else? I don't care. I want to build the world's digital commons. That's what I care about. And they already are doing it to the extent I can. So we've been very receptive to feedback. And I think that matters. So this is the starting point. But, You come and tell me, do not overload Ethereum consensus, and we go and invent a completely new protocol to not overload Ethereum consensus. And I'll tell you three things we did. Okay. So first one, there are three levels of overloading. The first one is social consensus, which we did with forking and the eigen forking. The second one is computational overloading. If I restake and run like 1,000 chains, it's not scalable. Only like 10 nodes will be able to run 1,000 chains. So how do you solve this problem? We built a horizontally scalable data system, EigenDA. This is, as far as I know, the only horizontally scalable data system, which means each node has very low bandwidth for publishing data. But together, they all have, I can aggregate all the bandwidth and scale the system. There are other systems like Celestia, which are built for decentralized verifiability. People can download a portion of data and verify that the system's working correctly. But inside the system, everybody downloads all the data. EigenDA is a system where nobody downloads all the data. There's no single point bottleneck in the entire system. It's fundamentally different. It solves the second problem, which is do not overload computation on Ethereum. The third one is the economic leverage, which a lot of people were worried about. You have the idea that the same stake is supporting 300 services, then who knows what happens? Like how does each service know how much economic stake that they have? So we had a whole series of breakthroughs there. We created a solution called StakeSure, and we have an upcoming version called attributable security, where if there's 20 billion staked on EigenLayer and there are 300 services, each service can bid how much security they want, a portion of the security, and draw like a portion of that security into them. They have a common pool. They're all validating all their services. But if you slash them, the ability to redistribute is bounded by how much attribution you take. Again, a new breakthrough. So we take these inputs like not capriciously. We take these inputs very seriously. Like, how do you build a system that actually works? And people were worried about having permissioning. Oh, you have to onboard AVSs. Like, who's onboarding it? Who's the slashing committee? Our new slashing protocol has no slashing committee. So, this level of like not just giving feedback, but taking it seriously and building something valuable, I think is important. I should also say, like, when we treat like we're building on Ethereum very seriously because we were approached by every chain to build EigenLayer on that chain. Today, you'll see these taking protocols on every chain. So there's a measurable cost for us. I could go build on every other chain and it's really easy. It's EVM. Just take the code and deploy it. But when we are committed, like one of my fundamental principles, play win-win games. What's valuable to us, what's valuable to you. And this is just true at its level of the protocols, it's the level of users. Otherwise it's not worth playing it. And so it is and same thing about how do we control, like if LSTs have this problem of like a single LST can take over, how do you minimize that effect on EigenLayer? So we put in this thing that rewards or core incentives distributed to a given LST or LRT is limited to 33%. So every feedback we've gotten from Ethereum, we take very seriously and we build it. And unfortunately, unlike a company, there's no one person or I can't sign a MOU and a deal. It's negotiation with the decentralized community. You need people who are really care about the community to be the face and interface for us to actually understand and talk to them.
Right. And there were some people within the Ethereum community that were not too happy that some of the Ethereum researchers are working with you, right? So there's contention even with that it's in itself, right?
That's correct. And, this is a hard thing for a decentralized community to do, right? Inside our company, we have a principle we call disagree and commit. It's a very Amazon principle, which is each decision, we negotiate openly, but after the decision is made, we disagree and commit as to what the leadership does. But there's no such clear protocol inside Ethereum. And I can sympathize with that because imagine I'm working at EF and I think, people should not take any other external advisory positions, for example. And, I given measurable opportunity cost because of that, because I believe that this is purely public service. And somebody else is like, no, it's actually win-win systems. Like what is useful for us as Ethereum and will grow the Ethereum ecosystem. Other people are building some things. We should actually support it. This is a very hard problem to solve. It's, inside, it's because Ethereum people talk about it. You just go and examine every other chain, how they operate. I mean, there's no principles. The foundation will fund like a bunch of projects. The founder will be like a major investor in a bunch of projects. There's no principles. It's Ethereum. We care about principles. So and other people use it like, when a community is fighting, like when a decentralized community is fighting, other people, it's in the incentive of all the others to fan these like internal fights.
And do you think it's good that that happens?
I think it's good. It's good that it happens because there were some unstated principles. If it is the principle to work in EF is pure public service, you should not have advisory positions and other relationships. That should be clear and transparent. If it is true, it is the opposite, that no, actually we are building win-win games and it's possible for people to engage in multiple ways. That should be clear. It should be clear what the like advising policy is from them. It should be clear to us because we talk to a lot of people at EF before we engage with the EF. It's not random. It's not capricious. We talk to everybody there. So, what do you do? Like you're from the outside. What is the right action? It's not transparent. It's not clear. What do you do? In fact, the thing that we were asked is, oh, do not use our names publicly. So we respect it. We're not putting, ABCD is there is marketing. It's not marketing for us. It's valuable inputs for us in actually understanding how to work with the Ethereum protocol.
One more question I have as we're kind of getting closer to the end. Obviously, there has been a lot of challenges on this journey, right? Like over the last 5 years or so, I'm guessing you ran into a lot of potential problems. I want to ask you what was the toughest one, or what has been the toughest one so far overall, especially recently. And I'm guessing, the token launch, like probably was a pretty stressful one, and the announcement and, the outcry of like everyone expecting more and all that. Is that the case, or are you not that concerned about any of that stuff?
I think it was pretty hard, right? Like the original token launch was very hard. The community feeling like we are bribing Ethereum or something was pretty hard. Us as like Eigen Labs, I founder CEO of Eigen Labs, Eigen Foundation created and launched the token. How do we work across organizational boundaries, all contributing to the Eigenlayer protocol? Very hard. How do we cultivate a culture of trust and transparency through to the entire ecosystem? It's very hard. As we went over the last 6 months, we went from a no-name protocol to now being treated as incumbent. Routinely, people write articles that are like, oh, Eigenlayer sucks because of X and Y. It's very hard. Like all of these are hard. And also, it's amazing how much community support and goodwill we've cultivated. It's not to be taken for granted. And we have to work to both double down and cultivate it deeper, but also change some of our like mechanisms. For example, when we did the mainnet launch, people felt like, oh, it came too quick, nobody knew, and we had to scramble to run our operators, we had to scramble to upgrade our LRTs, all this stuff. We were not thinking like a whole ecosystem depends on us. We were a startup with 25 people trying to kind of barely keep it going. And suddenly we are like Ethereum and like you have to run an all core dev call to like actually get any change. It's a different modus operandi. So it takes time for us to calibrate. Same thing with decisions. A decision on, when and how the tokens unlocked, or when and how the tokens released, or what is the conditions by which a drop is done. All of this, the Eigen Foundation has to learn how to make it much, much more transparent. And it's difficult. These are like, new emerging ecosystems. To find like the balance of powers, trust, transparency is difficult. But over the last few months, I've sit down and tried to create internal principles so that as we go forward, we can we understand what the problems are. We've taken the feedback and we try to like improve all our systems so that we can operate like as as verifiably and neutrally as Ethereum does. So that's our goal. It's not easy. Ethereum is a set a high bar. Ethereum itself has problems. So we need to figure out how to navigate this as a community.
And do you think from scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the most successful, 1 being the least successful, how successful do you think the token launch was compared to, Starknet, compared to other tokens that have announced this year? Because to me, it seems like when there is such a large, protocol that's being pre-farmed in some way, a lot of people very agnostic to actually the protocol itself, more so just to make as much money as possible, there's always going to be disappointment, right? For the vast majority. Everyone always wants more money or more reward for what they have done. Do you think it could have gone better in retrospect? Like, do you think you could have, if you had all this information now, would you change a few things, or do you think you were mostly still right? It was just painful because people are always going to be disappointed.
There is an aspect of that when the expectations were so high, I mean, it was crazy. People are saying, "Oh, this is going to run the bull market and all that." I'm like, guys, let's chill it. Like we're just barely getting started here. So the first thing I want to clarify is our time horizon. This is a 30-year project. That's the minimum time horizon that I want to think about. So when we think about a token launch, we are not a project which is operating on a few months horizon. So whatever the bump was, we will ride it out. It's not in the long term. If it led us to better principles of operation, if it led us to build better community trust, if it led us to uh, figuring out how a decentralized system can work, even though there is a central core developer community at EigenLabs, all of these things, if we can figure out, that is much, much more valuable than whether the token launched at X price. And when we know how the crypto markets are, they're the most volatile in the world. And for a new token, it is even more volatile than anything else. So I think that if I had to go back with all the things I've learned, absolutely would do it differently. Much more transparent would be the main difference on, because a lot of decisions are extremely well considered, but not well publicized. So do that better. But I think we have the opportunity still. It's the token's not yet unlocked. The ecosystem is just getting started, and actually cooling it a bit is not bad. I think it's actually really good. Launching with high hype and like too much high of like a valuation and everything is actually not necessarily optimal. We should like launch and grow and build everything up rather than like, crash and burn.
And that's really hard when you're one of the most anticipated projects of the year, right?
That's correct. In fact, like the funny thing is 1 month before the token launch, my kind of like our decision as a team was to let's cool down the expectations. So we like stopped tweeting, stopped doing a lot of things. Let's just like cool everything down. But it seems it went into deep freeze with the token launch rather than cooling it down. But I think it's the right thing that happened, like net, because we were the level of expectation versus reality. So this is always, I think, a thing with new technology is if it's something right in the long term, what happens is you overestimate what can be done in the short term and extremely underestimate what can be done in the long term. And so that's why we want to be in 10 years when you and I have this call, Larry, we can do a retrospective, and I hope what I said will be right.
Cool. Well, your insights have been super, super helpful. I have one last closing question. So in that 30-year horizon, right, or in the next 10 years, what do you want to accomplish? Like what would, if we have this call in 10 years, what would make you really happy in terms of succeeding? I'm guessing it's not necessarily the token valuation itself, but like, what would you want to have solved at that time?
Yeah.
And if we look back, like, what's going to make you excited? Is like, holy shit, I've actually done this.
Yeah, absolutely. So inside our company, our vision is to build humanity's coordination engine. This is the goal, to build humanity's coordination engine. I go back to coordinate flexibly in large numbers from Yuval Noah Harari. And if you think of money, money is as a mechanism for coordination. Right? So that's what it was. And in fact, I could maybe place it on this like 5,000-year horizon. You think about this societies like pre-monetary societies, basically tribal, have a small group of people, but extremely aligned for the long range. If you're a farmer, I'm a consumer. You're a doctor, I'm a patient. My well-being is inextricably tied with your well-being long term. Whereas it's so the very like intense coordination in small groups. So that was the kind of pre-monetary era. And you can think of the monetary era, which is where we are right now, is I can interact with anybody in the world based on monetary exchanges. And what that does is make the spatial scale infinite. So I can interact with anybody, or like I can go to a doctor, pay $100. I can go to a college, pay $200,000 and like get my education. But there is no long range alignment. It's transactional alignment. So I come together with you and then I work and I got this output and I'm gone. So it leads to certain pathologies. A college charges $200,000 for a degree and the student finds no job or has student debt that just balloons up over like a 50-year period. I go to a doctor and the doctor's incentive is, they only make money when I'm more sick. Okay, so no long range alignment. So can we create systems which have both infinite spatial coordination and long range alignment? That is what I mean by to become humanity's coordination engine. And when we think about it, what sorts of things might they be? The first thing you need, whatever those things are, what you need is a global system of memory. Like imagine I learned from 30 different people in order to do my blockchain thing today, right? And does the system remember that I learned from these 30 people? Number one. And then the second one is, does the system reward them over the long range for the things I've learned from them? So you need a decentralized system of memory and a decentralized system of enforcement, which is exactly what blockchains need to be. So you need to, so this requires, so to just go back to the two major, global scale problems like education and healthcare that one could think about, I go and what might be like solution is like, I can create, instead of funding my education out of debt, I could fund my education out of income shares of my future income, all of which are traceable on a blockchain. And I have my like Sreeram income share tokens, which gives out like, out of my future income back to the people I learned from. And I can go fund my education out of my income shares. So if you have global convergence on a common system of coordination, you can do this. This is insane and extremely powerful because, we know as a startup, I could never get funded on debt. Like right now, education is debt funded, but I could get funded on equity, which is long range alignment. And the thing is, what blockchains measurably do is to reduce the cost of enforcement and the cost of transaction for all of these things. By making it really obvious now, like I can go online with my Sreeram like income share tokens and use that to fund everything as long as everybody agrees that that's where all the income and everything should be noted. And the transaction costs just go to zero. Like it's pretty amazing that we can build systems like that. Same thing with education, with health and other stuff. Like you can have stuff that actually tracks each of these dimensions and makes sure people are rewarded when I'm doing well in health. Doctors should be rewarded for my increased lifespan, not my like immediate recovery and so on. So if you can build global systems of memory and global systems of enforcement, in like my own spiritual tradition, we call this karma, right? Karma is like what you do to the commons will do to you eventually. And it's both good and bad. And that is really what is required to build coordination systems as a system of karma. And in 30 years, that's what I'll be happy with. We've created that. That's the digital commons on top of which everything else can happen.
Very cool. Well, like I said, this was super insightful. I think this was one of the best interviews I've ever done in terms of actually, the level of depth that you think about, and also the time horizon. There are people in crypto that think in 6 months, you're thinking in 30 years. So very much appreciate your time, and hopefully we meet again in 10 years and look back at what we've accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be really exciting journey together. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you so much.